Carl Jung. To see someone's true character, pay attention to just two things. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Carl Jung. In a world where image often outweighs authenticity, how do we truly see someone's real character? Today, on Spiritual Wisdom, we're diving into a powerful lesson inspired by Carl Jung that reveals how just two subtle signs can uncover the truth behind any persona. This isn't about judgment. It's about awakening your inner awareness and deepening your connection with yourself and others. As you watch, think about your own life. Who around you has shown you their true nature? And more importantly, have you shown yours? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this message resonates with you, don't forget to like and share. Let's grow together, one insight at a time. 1. How they treat people who can't benefit them. They say character is revealed not when things are easy, but when life asks you to keep your word in the face of inconvenience. That's why Carl Jung's insight, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do," still holds weight in a world full of noise and empty declarations. True integrity isn't demonstrated in grand gestures or motivational speeches. It shows up in the small things, like showing up on time, following through on what you promised, and doing what's right even when no one is watching. These everyday moments are the real markers of a man's spiritual maturity. They are spiritual tests in disguise that ask, do your actions align with your values? Or do you abandon your word when it no longer serves your comfort? In today's fast-paced, results-driven world, it's easy to rationalize a broken promise. I got busy, things changed, or worse, radio silence. But every time you walk away from a commitment without accountability, you're not just disappointing someone else. You're weakening your relationship with yourself. A man who is spiritually awake doesn't hide behind excuses. He meets failure with honesty. He doesn't run from the discomfort of truth. Why? Because integrity isn't about perfection. It's about owning your impact and repairing it with grace. Keeping your word, especially when it's inconvenient, is a mirror of your internal order. It reflects a spiritual alignment, a self-discipline that comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for. Let's bring this down to earth. Think of the guy who promises his kid he'll be at the soccer game, but lets work take over again. Or the friend who says, "Let's catch up soon," but never makes the call. These may seem harmless, but over time, they chip away at trust. Now flip it. A man who shows up, even when tired, who follows through even when there's nothing to gain, he becomes someone others can lean on. That reliability isn't just a social virtue. It's the result of spiritual grounding. It means your values aren't just concepts, they're lived. They're embodied in your calendar, your tone of voice, and the way you show up in the world. So here's the challenge. The next time you make a promise, pause. Ask yourself, am I speaking from truth or just trying to please in the moment? And when you feel tempted to back out, remember keeping your word, especially when no one would fault you for breaking it, is the moment you grow the most. Spiritual awakening isn't always about meditation or rituals. Sometimes it's in how you handle your agreements, your mistakes, and your moments of truth. What kind of man do you become when your back is against the wall? That's where the character lives. That's where your spiritual path begins. 2. How they keep or break their promises. Have you ever noticed how some people say all the right things, but do none of them? Carl Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." And that one sentence reveals a powerful truth about character. If you want to truly understand someone, not their mask, but their soul, pay attention to how they handle promises, especially the small ones. You see, it's easy to talk about big dreams, to make grand declarations, or to post inspiring quotes online. But real characters show up when no one's watching and when it's inconvenient. A person's integrity isn't revealed in dramatic speeches. It's reflected in quiet moments of follow-through, like being on time when they said they would, or keeping a promise even when no one would notice if they didn't. Think about someone in your life who always keeps their word. Isn't there a sense of peace and safety that comes with knowing you can count on them? Now contrast that with someone who constantly overpromises and underdelivers. How does that make you feel? Let me tell you a story. A man once promised his daughter he'd attend her school play. It wasn't a big deal to the world, but it was her world. The day came, and he was exhausted from work, had emails piling up, and his boss had just asked him to stay late. But he remembered the promise, and despite everything, he showed up tired, stressed, but present. That moment didn't just make his daughter feel loved, it shaped how she would later define trust. Now ask yourself, how often do you show up for the people you love, even when it's hard? That's where the spiritual dimension comes in. Keeping promises isn't just about social duty, it's about alignment between your values and your actions. And that's what spirituality at its core is: living in alignment with truth, with love, with your highest self. Every time you honor your word, especially when it's difficult, you grow spiritually. And every time you avoid responsibility or make excuses, something within you weakens. Spiritual growth doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in the way we treat others, in the consistency of our actions, in how we carry ourselves when no one is applauding. When a promise is broken, a spiritually mature person doesn't run, deflect, or justify. They take responsibility with humility. And this self-awareness is the foundation of authentic personal transformation. So let me ask you, what do you do when your values and convenience clash? Do you stay true to your word, or do you retreat behind excuses? Think about it. Every decision you make is building your spiritual identity. You're not just creating a reputation, you're shaping your soul. In a world where words are cheap and appearances are carefully curated, the way you handle your promises is a mirror of your integrity. This isn't about perfection. It's about authenticity. It's about choosing to live from a place of inner alignment where your word actually means something. So next time you give your word, treat it like a sacred commitment, not just to others, but to your own spiritual growth. Because in the end, how you keep or break your promises isn't just about how others see you. It's about how deeply rooted you are in your own truth. Carl Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." And in this simple truth lies one of the most powerful tools for understanding human character. You see, when we strip away appearances, charisma, social status, and even intellect, what's left are two things that tell you more about a person than anything else: how they treat those who can do absolutely nothing for them, and whether or not they keep their word. These two seemingly ordinary behaviors are, in fact, spiritual mirrors reflecting not just the surface, but the soul underneath. And it's not just about watching others. It's about asking yourself, do I live by this same standard? In a world filled with filters and performances, where promises are broken with a shrug and kindness is often a transaction, spiritual wisdom teaches us to look deeper. When someone helps a stranger without expecting recognition or reward, when they speak respectfully to someone society deems less important, that's not just decency. That's the soul speaking without words. And when a person keeps their promises, even the small ones, even when no one is watching, that's integrity in motion. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious always reveals itself through action, not intention. So what do these actions tell us? That true character isn't loud. It doesn't beg for attention. It shows up quietly, consistently, and especially when no one's watching. So let me ask you who you are when there's nothing to gain. Do you honor your commitments even when it's inconvenient? Because how you treat people who can't elevate you, and whether you live by your word, isn't just a reflection of your values. It is your values. And maybe the most powerful part of this is realizing that you have the power to build trust, to attract genuine relationships, and to grow spiritually just by showing up with authenticity. What if you stopped judging character by charm and started watching for those subtle moments, like how someone talks to a waiter, or whether they follow through on a promise they made months ago? These small moments are the keys to spiritual awakening, not just about others, but about yourself. Because as you begin to notice these signs in others, you'll also become more aware of your own patterns, your own truth, and your own path to inner alignment. So next time you want to understand someone, don't ask how successful they are or how well they speak. Pay attention to how they treat the unnoticed and how they honor their commitments. And if you're serious about living with more depth, clarity, and alignment, ask yourself, am I becoming the kind of person I would deeply trust? That question alone can change your life. Because spiritual wisdom isn't about knowing others. It begins with knowing yourself. As we close this video, remember the core message. True character isn't revealed in what people say when they're being admired, but in how they act when no one is looking. Carl Jung reminded us that the soul's truth shines through in ordinary moments, not performance. So, let these insights guide you, not just to better understand others, but to become more conscious, more authentic, and more aligned with your own spiritual path. If this resonated with you, leave a comment below. What do you notice first in someone's character? And how do you stay true to yourself in a world full of masks? Don't forget to subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom and share this video with someone who values depth and transformation. Growth begins when awareness turns inward. 13 signs. You're hiding a kind of pain most people will never understand. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Carl Jung once said these words, not to frighten us, but to awaken something deeper within. In today's video, we're exploring 13 signs that reveal a hidden kind of pain. A pain so silent, so personal, that most people will never fully understand it. If you've ever felt like you're carrying a quiet storm inside, this message is for you. These signs aren't just reflections of suffering. They're symbols of strength, of a soul that's endured and survived. As you watch, ask yourself, which of these truths mirror your own journey? Leave a comment below to share your thoughts. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom for more insights that speak to the soul. 1. You've mastered silent survival. There's a rare kind of strength that doesn't come from triumph, but from survival, a silent survival. And if you're here, it's likely because you know exactly what that means. You've mastered the art of carrying wounds no one can see, hiding your pain not out of pride, but because life left you no other option. While the world sees a composed, capable man, what they don't witness is the quiet collapse that happens behind closed doors. You've become fluent in the language of silence, speaking only when necessary, and even then, often with a voice that hides more than it reveals. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And perhaps that's why you're here, not to pretend anymore, but to begin awakening. You didn't become hyper-independent because you wanted to prove something. You became that way because no one showed up when you needed them most. You've become your own anchor in storms that would have shattered others. But with every step forward, you've buried a piece of yourself deeper within. This is where the journey of spiritual awakening begins, not with fireworks, but with fatigue. Not with shouting, but with a whisper that says, "There's got to be more than this." And there is. Because your pain isn't meaningless. It's spiritual data. It's the coded language of your soul asking you to come back home to yourself. In a world that glorifies external victories, you've survived internal wars. You've built a life that works on the outside, even if sometimes it feels hollow on the inside. And that hollowness isn't weakness. It's the space your soul has been saving for something real, something sacred. You've worn masks of competence and confidence so well that most people wouldn't dare ask if you're okay. But underneath it all, you've been craving a space where being human is enough. Not being strong, not being successful, just being. And if that resonates, know this: you're not alone. Many men walk this path in silence because pain in masculinity is often met with shame. But you don't have to keep surviving alone. This is your invitation to step out of spiritual hiding and into spiritual healing. That means letting your walls down, not all at once, but enough to let the light in. In a modern world that pushes us to always be on, you have the right to unplug, to rest, to not have all the answers, because healing isn't weakness, it's a reclamation, and your soul knows it. When you start to acknowledge what you've buried, you begin to unlock a new kind of power, not the kind that conquers others, but the kind that frees you from yourself. This is the spiritual shift Jung spoke of. It's not about becoming more. It's about unbecoming everything you had to be to survive. So if you are tired, let that tiredness be a sign. If you feel lost, let that longing be your guide. If you are still here after all that you have been through, it means that something greater is calling you back within. Comment below, "I choose to come within." Your spiritual awakening is not about hiding from the world. It is about finally facing yourself and realizing that the pain you hide does not make you broken. It makes you real. And real is where your soul starts to breathe again. 2. Your strength hides your exhaustion. There's a kind of weariness that doesn't show up in your face but lives deep in your bones. It's the kind that comes from always being the dependable one, the person everyone turns to when things fall apart. You've become the rock, the rescuer, the steady hand in every storm. And somewhere along the way, you started to believe that your worth was tied to your usefulness. You confuse being needed with being loved, being strong with being safe. But the truth is, constantly holding everyone else together has left no one to hold you. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And for you, accepting yourself means admitting that strength has become your armor and also your prison. In a world that praises resilience, no one notices the cracks in your spirit or the quiet ache of always showing up when no one shows up for you. And so you keep moving, smiling, fixing, performing. You bury your exhaustion beneath competence. You tell yourself you're okay because falling apart feels like betrayal to them and to the image of yourself you've worked so hard to protect. But let's be honest, how long can you carry everyone else without collapsing under the silence of your own unmet needs? There's a subtle kind of pain in always being the strong one. It's not loud or dramatic, it's invisible. And it thrives in the spaces where you deny your own vulnerability to make others comfortable. Maybe you've even forgotten what it feels like to rest without guilt, to say no without fear, to admit that sometimes you're not okay. A man I once met, let's call him James, shared with me how he was the one everyone leaned on after his father died. He handled the funeral, supported his grieving mother, helped his siblings navigate the estate, and went back to work as if nothing happened. Months later, alone in his apartment, he found himself crying over a commercial about a father and son because it was the first time he allowed himself to feel. Not because he was weak, but because he had held so much for so long. James told me, "I didn't even realize I was exhausted until I finally let go." That's the kind of exhaustion we're talking about, the spiritual weight of constant emotional labor. Have you ever felt like your strength has become your mask? Like the more capable you appear, the less likely people are to check if you're okay. This is where spirituality and spiritual growth come in, not as escape routes, but as invitations. They ask you to peel back the layers, to confront not just the pain others give you, but the pain you carry in silence. True spiritual wisdom is learning that strength isn't just endurance, it's also honesty. It's in admitting, even just to yourself, that being the strong one doesn't mean you don't deserve to be held. In the teachings of Carl Jung, the path to healing always begins with facing the shadow of the part of you that feels unseen, unsupported, unacknowledged. That shadow is real, and it's not a weakness. It's your soul's way of asking for peace, rest, and reconnection. So, if you recognize yourself in these words, know that this is not a call to give up your power. It is a call to redefine it. Spiritual growth means learning to be strong and tender, courageous and open, trustworthy and honest. Comment below. I choose spiritual growth. You don't have to carry it all alone. And you certainly don't have to earn the right to rest. Maybe the next step in your journey isn't to keep going, but to stop. Not for them, but for you. Because your healing matters. Your tenderness matters. And in that stillness, you may realize that what you thought was your breaking point is actually your breakthrough. 3. You're deeply empathic, but it came from trauma. Let's talk about something most people never see, but some of us live every single day being deeply empathic. Not because it's some spiritual gift that bloomed in peace, but because pain demands it of us. You, my friend, may be carrying a level of sensitivity that didn't come from light, but from survival. You feel others' emotions before they even speak. You can sense tension in a room the moment you step in. You read faces, tones, and energies like your life depends on it, because once it actually did. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And for many people who have this kind of empathy, that's exactly what's happening. You're not just spiritual. You've been spiritually trained by trauma to survive in emotionally volatile environments. Maybe you grew up in a house where moods changed without warning. One moment it was calm, the next storm. So you adapted. You learned to read the unspoken, to anticipate anger, to soothe pain that wasn't yours, and to be what everyone needed just to keep the peace. That wasn't empathy as a choice. That was emotional hypervigilance as protection. But let me ask you something. Have you ever paused to ask where your feelings end and someone else's begins? This kind of empathy blurs lines. You might mistake absorbing other people's energy for connection, when really it's self-abandonment in disguise. And yet, because you're so good at feeling, people lean on you. They call you wise, intuitive, and spiritual. And yes, spiritual wisdom can grow from suffering, but only when you stop bleeding for everyone else. Carl Jung believed that the shoe that fits one person pinches another, meaning not every way of being is meant for everyone. You were forced into a role, a mask of compassion, long before you even knew what your own emotional needs were. But the truth is, being empathic because of trauma is different from being empathic because of freedom. One is survival. The other is the soul. So what does it mean to reclaim your empathy? It means learning that your intuition doesn't have to be a weapon of war. It can be a compass of peace. It means setting boundaries, even if your voice is shaky. It means choosing not to absorb pain that you didn't cause. This is where the real healing begins, when you realize that not everything you feel is yours to carry. You're not here to be a sponge. You're here to be a soul. And in that shift, in that sacred moment of realization, you no longer just feel deeply, you live deeply. And that's the difference between spiritual exhaustion and spiritual wisdom. So I ask you now, where are you still confusing empathy with duty? And who can you become if your sensitivity is no longer a shield, but a superpower? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. 4. You confuse overgiving with love. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. These words from Carl Jung aren't just a philosophical insight. They're a mirror reflecting the silent struggle many men carry deep within. And if you've ever felt like your worth is tied to how much you can give, fix, or carry for others, you may be hiding a kind of pain that even you haven't fully admitted to yourself. One of the most misunderstood signs of this hidden pain is overgiving, the kind of behavior that looks noble on the outside, but quietly deletes you from within. You confuse being useful with being lovable. And when you're not needed, you feel invisible. It's not that you don't care, on the contrary. You care so deeply that your empathy becomes a form of silent self-erasure. You pour into others as a way to prove your value, to secure your place, to earn your belonging. But in doing so, you often abandon yourself. This dynamic doesn't just play out in your relationships with others, it shows up in your career, your friendships, your family, even in the way you treat strangers. You give beyond your limits because you've been taught that love is something you earn, not something you inherently deserve. In a world that still tells men to be providers, protectors, and pillars of strength, it's easy to confuse sacrifice with affection and usefulness with love. But here's the truth that a spiritual awakening often brings to the surface. Love that requires your suffering isn't love. It's a transaction dressed in emotional obligation. Many men silently bleed behind smiles, offering help, advice, support, while no one asks them how they're doing. You may find yourself constantly being the fixer, the rescuer, the one people call when they're falling apart. But no one ever stays long enough to see when you're unraveling. This is not compassion. This is survival. And part of your spiritual journey is learning to untangle your empathy from your identity. You are allowed to be loved even when you're not useful. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to rest. Healing this pattern doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start including yourself in the circle of your care. True spiritual growth isn't about becoming invulnerable. It's about becoming honest. When you stop overgiving, you begin to feel the difference between being appreciated and being used. And that distinction is where your strength truly begins. So ask yourself, who would you be if you no longer had to prove your worth through your usefulness? What would love feel like if it didn't require you to bleed? This is not just emotional advice. It is the foundation of spiritual wisdom. It's the quiet transformation that turns pain into power, obligation into authenticity, and emotional labor into soul liberation. Gentlemen, your healing begins the moment you decide that your presence is valuable, not because of what you do for others, but simply because of who you are. If this resonates with you, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. 5. Love feels dangerous. When love feels dangerous, it's not because you're incapable of loving. It's because, at some point in your life, love was laced with pain. You learned early on that the people who were supposed to protect you might also be the ones who hurt you. So now, even when genuine love shows up steady, warm, and sincere, you flinch. You anticipate the moment it might vanish or turn against you. Affection doesn't feel safe. It triggers your survival instincts. Your heart wants to trust, but your body remembers what happened last time. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That's the power of unresolved pain. It shapes our responses without asking for permission. You might push people away, not because you're heartless, but because your nervous system has been trained to equate closeness with threat. This isn't a lack of emotional maturity. It's trauma in disguise. In the world of spirituality, we often speak of love as the highest vibration. Yet for someone who has endured betrayal, abandonment, or emotional neglect, love can feel like a setup for destruction. It's the paradox of spiritual growth. To reclaim the tenderness you had to shut down just to survive. Think of the veteran who comes home from war and can't sleep in a quiet room because silence now feels threatening. The same thing happens emotionally. Love soft and open can feel just as jarring as a loud noise in the still of night. I once knew a man in his 40s, a successful entrepreneur, respected and admired, yet deeply alone. He told me, "When someone's kind to me, I keep waiting for the catch. I've built everything by trusting no one. I don't know how to let anyone in. That man wasn't broken. He was protecting a younger version of himself that never got the safety he needed. And this is where spiritual wisdom comes in, not in pretending we're fine, but in learning to sit with the wounds long enough to understand them. Have you ever asked yourself, why do I pull away just when things are going well? That's not sabotage, it's self-protection. But healing asks for more than survival. It asks you to challenge what your nervous system has taught you. It asks you to build new associations where closeness doesn't mean danger and love doesn't mean loss. The real question isn't whether you're worthy of love. It's whether you're willing to meet the part of you that's terrified of it. Carl Jung's teachings remind us that spiritual awakening is not about running away from our human nature, but about embracing it fully, dark and all. So the lesson here is, love is not the enemy. It's the memories you haven't healed that are the enemy. And when you start choosing presence over protection, you reclaim the very life you thought trauma had stolen. Let this be a moment of reflection. What does it mean for you to stop running from love and start listening to what your fears are trying to teach you? Healing is not a destination, it's a decision. And every time you choose to lean into the discomfort of your awareness, you grow. That's spiritual growth. That's courage. And that's how you turn pain into power. Comment below with your determination to take this journey. I turn pain into power. 6. You live behind a persona. Carl Jung once said, "The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself as well as others think one is." If that resonates deeply with you, it's because you've been living behind a mask for so long that you have even started to forget what your real face looks like. You present yourself to the world as capable, composed, and in control. You carry responsibilities like armor, smile when you're breaking, and say, "I'm fine," when your soul is anything but. This carefully crafted version of yourself, what Jung called the persona, has become your shield, your survival tool, your socially acceptable disguise. And yet, behind it all is a silent ache, the longing to be seen, not as the strong one, but as the human one, to be held without having to hold it all together. Have you ever wondered why you feel so exhausted, even when you're not doing much physically? It's not the tasks. It's the emotional weight of being someone you're not allowed to drop. You've been so busy being who others need you to be that you've forgotten the soft, vulnerable, beautiful core that simply is. And what's even more painful is realizing that most people never ask what you look like underneath the mask. They don't ask what it costs you to appear so strong. But here's the spiritual advice. Your soul isn't here to perform, to impress, to survive. Your soul is here to connect, to feel, to be seen in its raw, imperfect light. Jung believed that healing comes from reconciling our shadow, not hiding it. So what if, just for once, you let someone see you for who you really are? Not the whole version, but the version that sometimes feels lost, tired, or invisible. What if, instead of proving your worth with endless strength, you let your truth become courage? The mask you wear may protect you, but it also isolates you. And true healing, true freedom, comes when you let go long enough to be seen not for what you do, but for who you are. So I ask you, who are you when no one is looking? And do you have the courage to show that person to the world, not all at once, but little by little? Because when you do, you begin the journey from survival to authenticity, from performance to presence. Let this be the moment you find yourself again, not as a persona, but as a soul deep within. Comment below. I choose to find myself. 7. Your suffering forged spiritual sensitivity. Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. The most massive characters are seared with scars. This quote by Khalil Gibran opens a truth that many men silently carry, especially those whose wounds are not visible, whose pain has turned inward, forming a quiet strength. If you're the kind of man who has walked through fire but still finds yourself staring in awe at the way morning light dances on your kitchen counter, or the way a warm cup of coffee settles something deep in your chest, know that what you're experiencing isn't fragility. It's spiritual sensitivity forged through suffering. And in today's world, where stoicism is often misinterpreted as emotional suppression, this quiet awareness is rare and deeply powerful. You see, Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." This awakening, this spiritual awakening, doesn't come from bliss. It often begins in chaos, in grief, in the breaking down of everything you thought you had to be. For many men, between the ages of 30 and 65, the expectations to perform, to protect, to provide, to never falter, can bury the soul under layers of unspoken pressure. But when pain has humbled you, when life has taught you to sit with discomfort instead of running from it, something sacred emerges, a sensitivity to life itself. You begin to notice the details others overlook, the sincerity in a handshake, the unspoken stories in tired eyes, the relief of silence after a long day. This isn't a weakness. It's a sign that your spirit, though wounded, never gave up. You didn't numb out. You didn't shut down. You stayed present, and that is strength. In an age of constant noise and show, your tenderness is not only groundbreaking, it is necessary. So let me ask you, how often do you stop to appreciate the version of yourself that keeps moving forward? The part of you that still finds beauty despite betrayal, that still believes in love despite pain, that still hopes even in silence. That is not just resilience. That is spiritual wisdom. And it deserves your respect. Because true spiritual awakening does not mean overcoming pain, but working with it. It means letting pain deepen your presence rather than harden your heart. It means trusting that your sensitivity is not a flaw, but a form of awareness, a finely tuned radar for what is real, what matters, and what you want to protect. So the next time you find yourself alone in quiet wonder at something small and beautiful, remember, it is your soul remembering itself. It is your heart proving that it is still alive. And that, my friend, is the kind of power that most people will never understand. But that is exactly what makes you unforgettable. If you find this helpful, please share this video so more people can hear these wonderful values. 8. You are undergoing individuation. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And if that quote stirs something deep within you, it's likely because you are going through something most people won't even recognize, let alone understand. You're not just healing, you're undergoing individuation, a powerful process in Jungian psychology where your true self begins to emerge, no longer hiding behind the roles, the pain, or the expectations you once had to wear just to survive. It's not always loud. In fact, most of the time, it's silent and internal, happening in the background of your daily life. You begin to feel a pull inward, a quiet call to integrate all the parts of yourself you once tried to reject: the anger, the grief, the confusion, and even the parts that longed for love in places it never arrived. This isn't just about personal development. This is about spiritual growth on a soul level. You are learning to embrace your sensitivity, not as a flaw, but as a spiritual compass, a guide that leads you back to the truth of who you are. That's the essence of real spiritual wisdom, not floating above the pain, but diving into it and letting it shape your character, your choices, and your compassion for others. There's a story I once heard about a man who had everything: success, a family, respect in his community, but he carried a quiet sadness, something that didn't go away no matter how much he accomplished. One day, he took a long drive to nowhere and ended up at a small diner in the middle of the desert. He sat there with a waitress who had lived through deep loss, and for the first time in years, he opened up. Not because she had answers, but because she listened without trying to fix him. That moment didn't change his life overnight, but it marked the beginning of his awakening. He stopped running. He began to let all of who he was come to the surface: his brokenness, his hopes, his failures, his longing, and slowly, through that acceptance, he found wholeness. That's what spiritual awakening looks like in real life. It's not dramatic or mystical all the time. Often, it's quiet, raw, and deeply human, just like you. So let me ask you this. Have you noticed a shift inside you lately? Do you find yourself becoming more reflective, more honest with yourself, more willing to feel instead of numb? That's not a weakness. That's transformation. Carl Jung believed the process of becoming whole required a descent into the shadow, a confrontation with all the parts of you that were hidden away for protection. But in that descent lies your power, your wisdom, your ability to live a life of meaning. Spirituality isn't about escaping reality. It's about meeting it face to face with truth, with love, and with a willingness to grow. And yes, growth is messy. It often feels like breaking before it feels like becoming. But in that breaking, you uncover strength that no surface-level comfort could ever give you. The lesson here is clear. Pain doesn't make you weak. It makes you wiser. Your sensitivity is not a curse. It's a gift. And your spiritual growth isn't about being perfect. It's about being authentic. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, misunderstood, or lost in your own emotional world, remember this: you are not broken. You are becoming. You are on a journey of individuation, and while it can be difficult, it is sacred. The world may not see the depth you carry, but it is that depth that makes your presence meaningful. So go ahead, embrace your story, speak your truth, and allow your spirituality to be more than just a belief system, but a living, breathing path back to yourself. If you find the video useful, please subscribe and like this video. It is the power that motivates us to share positive values. 9. You crave authenticity, not performance. There comes a moment in life when the weight of all the pretending simply becomes too much to carry. And if you've reached that point, then you're beginning to awaken into a deeper truth that only those who have suffered in silence truly understand. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that privilege is earned through pain, through masks, and through the exhausting performance of being what others expected instead of who you really are. If you're listening to this and feel weary of constantly adjusting yourself to fit in, of always being on just to be accepted, then know this: you're not alone. And what you're feeling is not weakness. It is spiritual wisdom stirring within you. You no longer crave applause or admiration for pretending to be fine. Instead, what you want more than anything is to be seen without the costume, to be loved not for how well you hide your cracks, but for the courage it takes to reveal them. You've learned, often the hard way, that your worth was never tied to your usefulness, your perfection, or your ability to hold everything together for everyone else. True healing doesn't come from fixing yourself to meet someone else's standards. It comes from coming home to yourself, from peeling off those layers of performance that you once believed kept you safe, but only made you feel invisible. Have you ever asked yourself why being honest about your pain feels more terrifying than hiding it? That's because the world taught you that vulnerability was dangerous, that realness was too much, too messy, too inconvenient. But what if being real is the very thing that sets you free? What if the people who are meant for you can only find you when you stop acting and start showing up as your whole self, scars and all? You're not seeking attention anymore. You're seeking connection. You're not trying to be impressive. You're trying to be at peace. And that shift in you is not small. It's spiritual. It is a sign of an inner awakening, of finally realizing that you were not born to perform. You were born to embody the wholeness of your soul. So here is a question for you to ponder. Who are you when no one is looking? And what does it feel like to let that person lead? The world is hungry for authenticity, but it begins with a courageous soul. The masks you wear were once your armor, but now they are your cage. And when you finally let them go, you will find that the truth of who you are is always enough. That is not only healing, that is liberation. And that, as Carl Jung might say, is the spiritual wisdom of becoming whole again. Comment below. I choose spiritual wisdom. 10. You've turned pain into power. Let me speak directly to you. Man to man, there's a kind of transformation that doesn't announce itself with noise or fireworks. It's not about standing on a stage or wearing a crown. It's about standing in the quiet aftermath of your own pain, still breathing, still trying, and realizing that what once tried to break, you actually built you. That's not just survival. That's mastery. And if you've come to this point, you've stepped into something Carl Jung called the alchemical process of the soul. Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And if you've lived through enough of it, you know that truth is carved into your bones. This isn't just theory. This is spiritual awakening in its rawest form. You've taken the lead of your life, the betrayal, the failure, the heartbreak, and you've faced it head on, not by numbing it or running from it, but by holding it in the fire of your own honesty, letting it burn away the illusion that strength means never hurting. Instead, you've embraced the truth, that real strength is choosing to feel it all, to stay with it, and to allow that pain to reshape you from the inside out. You didn't just heal, you rebuilt. And what you rebuilt wasn't some mask of toughness, but the gold of inner power, presence, and spiritual clarity. In the modern world, especially for men between the ages of 30 and 65, this kind of spiritual transformation often happens in silence. Society doesn't offer much room for vulnerability. You're expected to provide, perform, protect, but who protects you when your soul is breaking? That's the hidden crisis of masculinity today. But here's where your pain becomes your path. In the spiritual journey, every wound becomes a doorway. Every time you got back up after being knocked down, every time you chose to forgive when it would have been easier to shut down, you were walking the sacred path of the awakened man. You've lived through things most people will never understand, and instead of becoming bitter, you've become wise. That's spiritual wisdom earned, not inherited. It's in your ability to sit with someone else's pain because you've sat with your own. It's in the way you carry yourself, not louder, just deeper. And when people feel that gravity in you, they may not know your story, but they know your presence. So I want to ask you, have you honored the man you've become because of what you've overcome? Because your journey isn't just about survival, it's about transmutation. The way you've taken your lowest points and turned them into pillars of strength is not just admirable, it's sacred. In this world that often rewards numbness and denial, your willingness to feel, to evolve, and to awaken is revolutionary. You didn't just escape the fire, you became it. That's the mark of a man who's not only been through hell, but returned with wisdom to light the way for others. And that is what spiritual awakening truly looks like. So don't downplay your journey. Don't minimize what it took to become the man you are today. Let your story stand as proof that pain is not the end. It's the beginning of power. 11. You are a mirror for others. You might not realize this, but one of your most powerful gifts is the quiet way you help others feel understood. When Carl Jung said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people," he was speaking directly to people like you, those who've been through silent storms and somehow came out with enough spiritual wisdom to hold space for others. You've walked through the fire without screaming, carried emotional weight without complaining, and through that, you've unknowingly become a mirror. Not the kind that reflects appearances, but the kind that shows people their hidden pain and says, "You're not alone." That kind of spiritual presence, unspoken yet deeply felt, is rare. And what makes it even more extraordinary is that you're not trying to fix anyone. You don't hand out forced positivity or quick solutions. Instead, your presence validates. Your presence says, "I've been there. I see you. I get it." In a world obsessed with noise and superficial healing, you've cultivated a depth that only spiritual growth and experience can create. That depth, that empathy, comes from your own wounds, which didn't break you, but shaped you into the very healer you once longed for. And maybe that's what makes your journey sacred, not just that you survived, but that your survival became someone else's sanctuary. Think about someone in your life who always seems to gravitate toward you when they're struggling, not because you say the perfect thing, but because just being around you makes them feel safe. Maybe it's a coworker who opens up when nobody else is listening, or a friend who texts you during their worst moments because your silence is louder than empty comfort. These moments are not coincidences. They're evidence of your spiritual wisdom in action. People sense that you've wrestled with life in ways they don't fully understand, and that gives them permission to feel, to grieve, to hope. In a sense, you've become a vessel of healing without even trying. But have you ever stopped to wonder who holds space for you? Who mirrors your soul back to you when you're exhausted from being the strong one? That's where your own spiritual growth continues. The journey isn't just about giving to others. It's also about learning to receive, to allow yourself the same grace you offer so freely. So let me ask you this. What would happen if you stopped being strong for everyone else for a moment and just allowed yourself to be human? What would change if you realized that being a mirror doesn't mean being invisible? That your light isn't just meant to reflect others, but to be seen in its own right? In the path of spirituality, there's a lesson we often overlook. You are not just a healer, you are also worthy of healing. You are not just a guide, you are still allowed to get lost sometimes. And in your most honest moments, when you stop performing strength and instead show your truth, you deepen not only your own spiritual wisdom, but also the bonds you share with others. This is the silent revolution of the wounded healers, who walk through life carrying invisible pain, but bringing visible peace. You have become a living reminder that transformation is not loud, but sacred. That power lies not in armor, but in an open heart. So carry this with you. Pain does not make you weak. It makes you deep. It makes you radiant. It makes you someone who not only survives, but teaches others how to live. And that is the true power of spiritual growth. Comment below. I embrace this spiritual power. 12. You've reclaimed your life. There comes a time in your healing journey when you no longer want to be identified by the pain that once defined you. And maybe, just maybe, you've reached that sacred turning point, the moment when you stop measuring your worth by how much you could endure or how productive you could be on your worst days. You're not wearing survival as a badge anymore. Instead, you've reclaimed your life with quiet courage and spiritual wisdom. As Carl Jung said, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. You are no longer surviving. You are finally living, breathing, choosing. You've stopped apologizing for needing rest. You no longer view boundaries as walls, but as doors that allow the right energy in and keep the chaos out. You ask for what you need, not because you're needy, but because you know you are worthy. And in that subtle shift, there's power. Real power. You've learned that softness isn't weakness. It's resilience wrapped in grace. You've let go of the need to perform strength through constant exhaustion, and instead, you embody a strength that whispers, not screams. One that doesn't break itself to prove something to the world. Can you feel the weight that's lifted when you stop needing to explain your healing to people who were never meant to understand it? Can you recognize how sacred it is to simply rest without guilt, to say no without explanation, to pause without panic? This isn't just emotional maturity, it's spiritual awakening. And as you shed the layers of who you thought you had to be, you're uncovering a version of yourself who was never broken, just buried. You're rediscovering joy in moments others overlook. The warmth of sunlight on your skin, the peace in your morning breath, the truth in your own reflection. You've stopped running from your past, not because it didn't hurt, but because it no longer controls you. And you carry that inner stillness like armor, quiet but impenetrable. So let me ask you this. What parts of your life have you outgrown? And which parts are finally blooming now that you've chosen to live instead of survive? You see, reclaiming your life isn't a one-time event. It's a daily decision to choose self-respect over people-pleasing, peace over performance, alignment over approval. You don't need to prove your growth to anyone. Your presence speaks for itself now. And this is what spiritual wisdom looks like in practice. Not perfection, but presence, not control, but trust, not striving, but allowing. So, if no one told you today, let me be the one to say it. You're doing the sacred work. And in reclaiming your life, you haven't lost anything, you've simply returned to yourself. The journey may have started with pain, but where you're going now is defined by peace. Keep walking, because your path isn't just about survival, it's about awakening. If you find the video useful, please subscribe and like this video. It is the power that motivates us to share positive values. 13. You've risen transformed, not broken. There comes a point in every man's life when he realizes that the very pain he tried to hide has shaped the most sacred parts of who he is. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And that truth echoes in you. You are not broken. You are transformed. What once felt like emotional overload, sensitivity, or depth that isolated you from the world has become your source of spiritual power. You walk not as a wounded man, but as a man who has been reborn through the ashes of everything that was meant to destroy him. In a world that taught you to equate masculinity with silence and toughness, you learned that real strength is found in your ability to feel deeply and survive anyway. You've been through the fire, and now your soul burns not with pain, but with purpose. This isn't weakness. This is a spiritual awakening. It's the moment when you stop hiding your emotional truth and start embracing it as a divine instrument of clarity and connection. You have become the quiet revolution, a man who leads not through loudness, but through presence, whose energy shifts the room not with dominance, but with gravity. In modern life, where men are constantly told to man up, what does it mean to rise spiritually? It means becoming unshakable, not because you avoid pain, but because you've sat with it, wrestled with it, and learned from it. Your pain is not a scar to conceal, but a compass that now guides you toward meaning, love, and authenticity. You're not here to play small or perform perfection. You're here to be real, to be awake, to be whole. And yes, that scares people who haven't faced themselves, but that's not your burden to carry anymore. You've outgrown the illusion that your softness makes you weak. You've realized that your emotional honesty is a form of spiritual wisdom, one that few understand, but many need. So now, as you stand in your truth, ask yourself this: are you living to be accepted, or are you living to be free? The world doesn't need more men pretending to have it all together. It needs men like you, awakened, aware, and willing to be the mirror that shows others what transformation really looks like. Because when you stop seeing your past as a curse and start honoring it as the birthplace of your awakening, you become something unforgettable. Not invincible, but undeniable. Not flawless, but unshakably real. That is the man you were always meant to become. That is your spiritual revolution. And the question is, are you ready to walk fully in it? As we come to the end of this video, remember this: the pain you've hidden, the silence you've carried, and the depth you've earned were never signs of weakness. They were the birthplaces of transformation. You've turned suffering into wisdom and become a soul forged in fire, not to be pitied, but to be revered. So let today be the day you stop hiding your truth and start honoring your strength. What part of your journey resonated most with you? Share it in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. And if this message spoke to your soul, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and turn on notifications so you won't miss what's coming next. Your healing is not just personal, it's powerful.